So what I want to do in this video, just like with the introduction videos for all the other courses that we are making content for, is take a very brief introduction and look at contract law as a way of defining different terms. Okay, so we want to really come to kind of an understanding of what contract law entails, okay, the difficulties that we have in defining what a contract is, and then just outline the basic structure of the first half of this course when we start to look at the different aspects, the basic principles of a contract, which will become important as we develop our understanding along the line. So it should be first noted that when it comes to English law and the law in general, there is no single definition of contract. So there's no single definition of what we would call a contract. But that doesn't stop people, coming to some kind of definition that tries to encapsulate as much of the information as possible. So, for example, in textbooks, we find different definitions, like this one here of Anson's Law of Contract from 2010, Oxford University Press, argues, he makes the claim that on page 1 that the law of contract may be provisionally described as the branch of law which determines the circumstances in which a promise shall be legally binding on the person making it. So this is one way in which you can define, provisionally define, important to note there, is one way of defining a contract. Okay. And of course, this is not the only definition. Okay, I'm going to put in the extra reading section in the description below a number of other places where you might find definitions of contract law. Effectively, every single different textbook you will find on contract law will have a different definition of a contract. However, the lack of an agreed definition of a contract, okay, is not really some kind of inadequacy in terms of the law. It's more of a product of the way in which contract law in England has developed. Okay, and obviously we're going to talk about how it's developed as we continue on this course. So it's not something that is a problem necessarily to define a contract. Just like if we're talking about the law of equity and trusts, a single broad definition of a trust isn't something that is necessarily going to be agreed upon across all a number of different legal scholars. These are things that are products of the history of the development of the law. And despite there being no single definition, there are a number of universally agreed principles. Okay, so they are generally universally agreed. Okay, generally universally agreed. And what's important is that there are some people that would argue that there are more principles that need to go into this sort of catalogue of principles that to define a contract. But the general principles of contract law are what we're going to use to break up our understanding of the course. We're going to take each of the different principles in turn and discuss the law on them. So before we finish, let's just make a very basic introduction to the general principles. So like I said, generally speaking, to conclude a contract, there must be three things. Okay, the parties must reach an agreement. Okay, the agreement must be supported by consideration, and there must be an intention to create legal relations. And when we're talking about agreement, an agreement is normally a twofold concept of an offer plus an acceptance of that offer. And in the next video, we're going to talk about offer and acceptance, okay, and focus specifically on, in the next few videos, on an offer, okay, and draw a number of different distinctions, things like a distinction between an offer and an invitation to treat, and all these kind of things. But these are the three things as well. Consideration, again, a kind of the kind of a legal principle that we're going to look at later on, and again, an intention to create legal relations. Generally speaking, it must be if these three things, okay, are recognised in the situation that in the particular case we're talking about, then it should be generally accepted that a contract exists between the parties within the case. And because these are basic principles of contract law, we're going to be spending a lot of time with these concepts. Okay, we're going to be spending a significant amount of time, okay, talking about the different requirements to achieve sufficiently an acceptance of these three principles. In the next video, we're going to take an introduction to acceptance, to agreement, and we're going to focus specifically on the first part of agreement, which is the offer. And we're going to spend a few videos looking at the different legal implications and a number of cases surrounding the law of an offer.